The gravy market is worth £100 million, and two-thirds of it is dominated by one brand. In Britain, if you think gravy, you think Bisto. For centuries, the finicky task of gravy making had troubled Britain's cooks and homemakers. The fine balance between stock, flour and meaty juices was not always easy to achieve. Imagine everyone's delight then, when in 1908, the grumblings of two housewives inspired the invention of one of Britain's best-loved brands.
Bisto originated when Mrs. Mac Roberts and Mrs. Patterson both got fed up with making gravy in Hartlepool in the early 20th century.
They got their husbands to create a gravy salt which was, going to do their roast proud. And the story goes that the letter stood for Browns, Seasons, Thickens in One. Personally, I'm not quite sure that's actually true. I think it's more that there were brands around at this time where the letter O at the end made it into something which the public kind of felt was more rather fun, Aspro, Oxo, Brasso even.
Having settled on a name for the miracle powder, Bisto's arrival was announced to the world by a full-page advert on the front cover of the Daily Mail, Friday the 4th of February 1910.
Can't see too many brands being bold enough to launch with a front page ad on one of the national newspapers. Bisto were forerunners in that idea of being bold and being big and making a splash.
Little wonder it made the front pages, as for women across the land it heralded a domestic revolution.
When Bisto first came out, the ordinary housewife did live a much busier life than we did. The idea of something in a jar on the shelf you just grabbed, stirred into the gravy was great. Bisto was an early convenience food.
As Bisto grew in popularity, they started to come under fairly stiff competition. Other brands were now entering the market. Bisto obviously needed something to stand out from the crowd. So in 1919, they commissioned Will Owen to create an advertisement. And he came up with the Bisto Kids and this wonderful phrase, "Ah, Bisto."
This Bisto advertisement by Will Owen, the whole series, and many of the other posters of that period are, to me, great art. But great art is simplicity, and the simplicity of those things, I think, have made them forever unforgettable. The style is a British style. If you compare it to any continental posters or a lot of advertising abroad or even in America, it's different. It's redolent of the music hall. A lot of them have humour, they have little jokes in them and stuff like that, very English.
During the Second World War, with all sorts of food and finer things in short supply, resourceful Brits were using Bisto to make do and mend. On the home front, it wasn't just gravy that Bisto was browning.
Nylons became the thing for the young ladies to wear. And when the war started, nylons were impossible to obtain. Now, the trademark of a nylon was that it had a seam down the back. So the young ladies would brown their legs to make it look as if they had stockings on, and then draw a black line down the back of the leg for the seam. And that was one of the uses for Bisto.
It was wonderful. For you will go and eat in the evening, going dancing, but sometimes it could all go wrong. If it was very hot, you started to sweat, it would streak.
It did attract a lot of dogs because the smell of meat probably was too much for those poor hounds looking for a bit of bone.
Just as the nation welcomed meat back onto its tables in post-war Britain, so we welcomed the Bisto Kids into our homes via the new medium of television.
The great story with the Bisto Kids, of course, with the coming of TV commercials in the 1950s, was they then become adapted to the new medium and become characters, animated characters.
Go on, you can reach it. Something's cooking.
They are this real connect with the public and really sell the product.
Times weren't just changing for the Bisto Kids. In 1979, Bisto, the original convenience food, made life even more convenient for the nation's housewives with the introduction of gravy granules. No more faffing with joints and juices. All you needed was hot water. 5 years later, chicken and onion flavoured gravies were added to the range, and Bisto decided to get saucy with cheese and parsley. Throughout all these innovations, the ever-familiar catchphrase remained constant.
Ah, Bisto.
But in 1987, there was one unexpected casualty.
I was utterly devastated. I mean, I was just, there are certain things you cannot believe. There are certain things you cannot touch. And one of those is the Bisto Kids. It was almost like a loss in your family. They were almost like children, lost children that would never be seen again, that had been destroyed by some great corporate ogre.
The image wasn't quite right for a more affluent Britain. And also, of course, the people that were cooking the meals were no longer necessarily just sort of housewives. They were women that were going out getting careers. They were having different lives.
The Bisto Kids might have gone, but children, and indeed the importance of the family generally, became central to the Bisto story. Now, in shifting the focus to the hearth and the home, Bisto was going head-to-head in the territory of its greatest rival.
Oh, shut up, you two! Careful! Oh, now look what you've done!
The OXO family was fundamental to building up the OXO brand. Of course, then there's confusion between OXO and Bisto, which one is which. Actually, which one does the family work for? Is it Bisto? Is it OXO? I can't remember. So, people do get confused. In a way, it didn't harm Bisto. It actually built up that image of, gravy, the roast dinner, the great British dinner and so forth, being a family meal and being something that's important.
There is an association between Bisto gravy and cosy, settled family life, and I think it taps into a deep well of nostalgia.
Sometimes the smell of Bisto gravy really takes me back. I don't remember my mother teaching me how to make proper gravy. Somehow I just picked it up, I suppose.
But it's most recently that Bisto have trumped up the importance of hearty fare, smothered in gravy, and the importance of the shared meal for family unity with the launch of their Our Night campaign.
The Our Night campaign is the Bisto pledge to eat a family meal together at least once a week.
I, James Metcalf.
I, Deborah.
I, Keith Jones, father of two.
Do solemnly promise
to you, my family,
to spend more quality time together,
chatting about the stuff of life,
doing what families do.
Which is why we make this pledge
to change our routine.
I was with my brass band in Gorton Market, and the camera crew approached us and asked us if we wanted to be on it. Anthony, the euphonium player, said that he wanted to be on it, but the woman asked me if I would.
So henceforth, from this day forward,
this night
will be our night, our family night.
I think it's a brilliant campaign. Again, it gets the public involved. It kind of almost shows Bisto as a people's champion. This is important to our British way of life.
I think a campaign like the Bisto Our Night can just make people aware that something which is important to them has perhaps slipped out of their life.
Whether or not the Bisto gravy boat can ferry families back to the table remains to be seen, but it's easy to understand why the brand has a keen interest in our family affairs. The steady decline in communal domestic meals has led to the gradual disappearance of the Sunday roast, and no roast means no gravy, a frightening prospect for Bisto. It also had to worry about OXO launching its own range of gravy granules in '91, but luckily for Bisto, that did little to topple its status as the grand dam of gravy. All in all, the brand seems to be weathering the storm well, but what it boils down to is this, that the fortunes of Bisto are linked to the fortunes of the British family, and no doubt will be for generations to come.
This is an icon. This is something unforgettable, which I think is in all true Britons' hearts and souls.
You think roast beef, you think Yorkshire pudding, you think Bisto. All of that is British.
There are certain brands which we clearly feel are British, and essentially they're the ones that we grew up with. They're the ones that we know are made in this country. Bisto clearly qualifies as a great British brand.